Now, let's throw some perspective on this. Joining us tonight, veteran politicians, Professor Ogenga Latigo, former leader of opposition, and Captain Francis Babu, former member of parliament, and also former NRM SEC member. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us this evening. I'll begin with you, Professor Ogenga Latigo. Opposition political parties do, of course, accuse President Yoweri Museveni and the NRM on particularly not relinquishing power or creating space for others to lead. But even them, the political opposition parties, why are they not walking the talk?
Well, thank you very much, Canary. You see, the biggest challenge that Uganda faces is that we have been living in delusion. When the NRM was forced to accept a multi-party dispensation for this country, the acceptance was not about opening space for parties, for Ugandans to form parties, make decisions about their future, and elect genuinely their leaders. It was merely, let us give them this multi-party thing. But it's not about us relinquishing power. I had my old friend Dombo saying that for them, as long as the president still wants to lead, they are happy with it. So the point is that politics in Uganda is not about the country. It is about interests, petty interests, about individuals who influence things. And it is about, exercising power so that you can do anything to people in this country, the way we saw in the by-election in Kawempe, or even me being the center returning officer who made sure many of us who stand firm for our people were knocked out. So to blame the parties is a diversion and an exercise in futility. Until Uganda's political framework changes to allow people to make their own independent choices, nothing that you will say about parties in opposition will change anything.
Prof, I want to understand from your perspective, Uganda's constitutional framework might be actually done through the constitution, but what about political parties that have their own independent constitutions? Should we then think about introducing term limits for leadership in these political parties? You have different political parties in opposition, but their leaders have been, some say, here for quite a while.
No, I mean, when we formed the FDC as a party, we actually instituted term limits for key leaders. I served 2 terms as deputy president. Those 2 terms were terms that I gained through elections. And after the 2 terms, seeing what was happening in my party, where the focus was shifting away from the challenges that we saw had faced the country and made us call FDC slogan, One Uganda, One People. And then the shift from NRM by so many people like Augustine Ruzindana, Muntu, who actually regretted the removal of term limits. And when I started seeing that happening, I left. And even when the 2 term limits was there, Muntu was never allowed to complete his second term. The people who had self-interest brought in Amoria Toboy to contest against Muntu. And eventually they removed Muntu to the detriment of FDC and their own detriment. The people who orchestrated this eventually also got thrown out of the party. So the problem now is you go into politics, at most it is about your self-interest. At most it is about empty posturing.
Prof, kindly stay with us. Let me cross over to Captain Francis Babu. Shine a spotlight on NRM. You've had a chairman for nearly 40 years clinging to power. What does that mean for political dispensation?
Thank you very much, Kenry, and good evening to all our viewers. I would like to start off by saying that first and foremost, I'm not a spokesman for NRM. I am a member who has been there for some time, and there's a reason why I was there. Now, to go back to your question, you are taking a very minute detail of the country, Uganda, in a democracy, a bigger picture of a country. Parties, if you like, they are vehicles that help us to get into leadership of a country. And that vehicle belongs to a certain group of people, and they give themselves a name. Normally, they choose their leaders within their own constitution, and this happens to all parties. Now, we also have another problem. We have borrowed these parties from foreign countries, so we are copying a system. Secondly, since we copied this party from 1950, we've never understood them, and we have a problem how they operate in a democratic playfield. Now, you have a problem. We also have culture. We've got most of our culture from kingdoms. So people have a tendency to give their leaders names. You'll find that there's somebody called Baba, find somebody called Jaja, you'll find somebody called all sorts of names. In other words, they do this to sort of give them these names so that they can get something from them. And this is very common. It's a cultural problem. Now, to go back to your question, why do leaders stay in this position that long? It's because we tend to think that once you are in leadership, you are there because you are God-given. And some people believe that. Look at one of the countries next door to us, and many others in Africa. They have the same problem. Now, immediately you start calling a leader a Baba, you start calling a leader Mukama Wange, you start calling leader names of Zay, for example, the one in Tanzania, you've heard of things like Mwalimu, and many other places they have these names. Now, these names also convey a certain level of dignity, and therefore some people use them to maintain that status quo. And some people believe by staying there, their party is strong because the person has got a certain attraction. And this is where the problem is. We are the ones who make those leaders stay in those positions. It's not the leaders. It is the people who support them, who keep them there all the time in our environment of understanding democracy. So our problem is,
coming here, you talk about NRM, for example, being a political vehicle and should be belonging to the people that subscribe to its ideologies like yourself. Why then does it feel like it belongs only one person? Also, do you see a problem with a sole candidate syndrome?
The word sole candidate really is a new word. This is unopposed, basically. What they do, they make sure that the leader is unopposed in most of the elections. Either they talk to the people who are standing against him, or they intimidate them. Like a few minutes ago, I was reading somebody intimidating somebody who wants to stand. Those are the kind of things you get in this a rather cheap environment of political areas. But basically, people have tried to stand against these leaders, and they have been discouraged in one way or the other, either by asking them to step down, or by asking them, giving them even jobs in some cases. This has happened also in other countries. What apparently is that we have not yet understood how a political party works. We think by having a person there, he becomes so popular, you start calling him Mukama Wange, or actually, I've had some people referring to some of our leaders, they are gods. So we have to be very careful that first and foremost, we must understand that most of our people have not yet understood how a party works. And this is very unfortunate, and it will go on until we find a solution by building a true democracy in our country. And like somebody who talked earlier on, I heard you quoting somebody, we must build democracy brick by brick, and even build the parties brick by brick.
Thanks, Captain. Kindly stay with us. Let me cross over now to Professor Latigo. Prof, looks like the political parties in Uganda are still stuck with old centers of power. What will it take to dismantle them, to allow other people to be able to compete democratically and also have a say?
You know, if all of us had committed to this Uganda fast, if all of us were committed to that, these fights about power would not arise, because the question would simply be, yes, you have been in office for 5 years. What have you done for Uganda that justifies your desire to continue? Otherwise, leave. But in our case here, the country continues to deteriorate. People are given small monies. The campaigns come. The opponents are never given clear chances to do things. And in the end, we delude ourselves that we are there because the country desires our presence. No country desires to deteriorate the way Uganda has deteriorated. Go to the villages. Go to the slums in the poor areas of Kampala. Just leave the main streets, and you'd be shocked at the level of poverty in a place like Kampala, a city that grew on the wealth of Buganda, coffee, cotton. Yes. So I'm sorry. Until we put Uganda first, it doesn't matter which party you belong to, as long as it is not about Uganda first, and where you accept that others also belong and must play a role. This struggle will not be about party, but it will be about liberation of the country.
Interesting perspective right there from Professor Latigo. Captain Francis, briefly, as we conclude this conversation, some of these changes could have taken place in delegates' conference. It's been a while since a political party in Uganda organized a delegates' conference. Are we missing something here?
No, we're not missing anything. Listen, a good leader is the one who makes other leaders. In other words, the leader at the top is a mentor of the leader below him and below him. And I'll give you an example. Remember some time ago, some people saying that you must have a running mate in a presidential system. If you had a running mate and you chose a weak vice president and then God called you or you resigned, the weak vice president will not make a president. So time has come. The leaders must learn to make other leaders who can come into their position. Delegate conferences are not a problem. They are going to hold them. But during a delegates conference, like I read somewhere, somebody said, if you give some people money, they can even amend the Bible. So all I am trying to say, let us try and make democracy work.
Captain Francis Babu, Professor Ogenga Latigo, gentlemen, many thanks for speaking to us tonight and sharing your perspectives with us.